Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, in association with my good friends at Preaching Today and Food for the Hungry. I bring you a podcast that hopefully helps you get better at the craft of teaching and preaching and communicating the good news while always hoping and ensuring that your character leads the way. Today, I'm really excited because I get to introduce you to one of my long-term friends, Jay Hewitt. He's a pastor. He is an incredible leader. He's just someone that we went to college together. So many moments in ministry and in life, we've just really been able to turn to one another, encourage one another, spur each other on. He is an absolute gift. And he wrote a book that came out late last year. It's called I Am Weak, I Am Strong. And it is a book that is deeply personal. And I'll let him talk about why. It is a book, though, that is anthemic. It is a clarion call for every one of us. It is a challenging, inspiring, beautiful read because you find yourself in moments where things happen. You don't get what you deserve, or you don't get what you think is right, or you get surprised. And really the question is, how are you going to respond? And one of the greatest, in my opinion, showcases of character is how someone chooses to respond. And that's why Jay's on this podcast. The guy can preach. We could talk about preaching all day. He can lead. We could talk about leading all day. But his greatest, in my opinion, gift to me as a friend and as a brother, as a Christ follower, has been the way he's responded to the events that have unfortunately been handed to him, and in a way where it has just allowed Christ to be seen in a really fresh and a really honest and a really human and really deeply personal way. And so without further ado, Jay Hot Rod Hewitt, that's what we called him in college. Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks for never letting the hot rod part die. I appreciate that very much, Mr. Carter.
You had a van in college, and that van was so tricked out. I mean, you're from Yucaipa, California, and it's kind of like biblical, like what good comes from Nazareth? What good comes from Yucaipa? And I honestly, I feel like you've done Yucaipa well, bro. You have done Yucaipa well.
When you got good roots, good things are going to happen. Go Yucaipa.
Go Yucaipa. Jay, let's just jump right in. And you wrote this book, and I remember I was speaking at Camp Pondo, and you drove up, and we went for a little bit of a hike, and this was pre-COVID, but you really kind of talked to me about this kind of mantra, this anthem, and how this verse was just carrying you, guiding you, inspiring you. Talk about the verse and talk about what actually made you lean into this verse and why it's so personal to you.
So 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. And the word says that, God's power is best displayed in weakness, and his grace is sufficient. And so Paul then concludes, well, then when I'm weak, then I'm strong. And, all scripture is applicable to us. We preach on the whole counsel of God's word. However, every once in a while, you just know that there's something that God's working. And I knew it from this moment that I had in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. So I had just received a diagnosis for terminal brain cancer, and it just wrecked me and my wife and my daughter. And I dropped my daughter off at school. And after that, I went to Dunkin' Donuts to, get get some saturated fat. And as I got my maple bar, I was sitting in the parking lot, and I prayed, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And, the primary emotion below that was confusion. Most people assume that it's anger. And yeah, of course, there's some anger in there, but it was really confusion, because here I am, a young father. Hero was 4 years old at the time. I just planted a new church that was doing really well. And my marriage was strong at that point after a lot of work. And I couldn't understand why. Not just why me, as most people ask, but why now? And so I just had this really frank, direct prayer of, God, what are you doing? And in that moment, my mind and my heart and my soul were all directed to that passage in 2 Corinthians 12, 9, and 10. My grace is sufficient. Because I was in a very similar situation to Paul, right? He had this thorn in his flesh. He prayed 3 times for it to be taken from him. And the answer was no. And the answer, and Jesus was kind, the Spirit of Jesus, to reveal further, said, no, but my grace will be sufficient. My power will be perfected in weakness. And that allowed Paul to say, okay, well then when I'm weak, then I'm strong. And I just had this insight that I was going to live this. I was going to understand how it is possible that God's grace is sufficient in a time that is so scary and uncertain and sad. And also, I was gonna get a chance to learn that truly, when we're weak, then we're actually strong, and what that looks like. I knew that there's going to be a spiritual component to it, but I also wondered, what does that look like in the day to day, and is there a physical manifestation that could point towards the spiritual underpinnings of the whole thing? And so, from that experience at Dunkin' Donuts, I started walking differently. I started thinking differently. Started praying differently, as if in my weakness, this is the strongest I've ever been.
It's interesting. I think oftentimes when life does what it does, you almost can have permission just to, as you said, eat the saturated fat and just kind of escape and numb out. And I think you found this anchor verse, and I know you and I, we've talked about my dad. My dad didn't know Christ for most of my life, and he was a big businessman, angry. And then I watched him come to faith, and a few years later get diagnosed with leukemia. And for 12 years after a bone marrow transplant, battled, and this 300-pound offensive lineman, was just losing weight and losing his teeth and his new marrow, new body, and yet internally he was getting stronger. And as I was reading your book, I felt like I saw the best parts of my dad, because he was someone who always came across powerful and strong and angry. And then life showed up, and it forced him to have to consent to reality. And it was like faith and character school, and something was happening. And, Jay, I've known you, over 20 years, and, college, you were strong. You won the award for best preacher at our school, and, biblical studies award, you had stuff together in life. You knew what you were going to do. And, and I would say though, watching you through this journey, and even in your writing and even in your life, the vulnerability, the vulnerability, the way that you have just allowed yourself to feel the full embodiment of what weak and what strong looks like because of that verse. You didn't see it as permission to numb out. You saw it as an invitation to embody a text. What were some of the learnings? Because, I think we all want to be resilient people. We all want to be people who respond well. but you had a choice there. You made that first choice. Um, and then you started to like really make some conscious choices. And then you made a choice to do an Ironman. We'll get to that in a moment. But like, talk about some of those, because you really have to like discern. You write about this. Like, was that Jay's voice? Was that God's voice? Like, how discerning, am I doing the right thing? Like, and there is this like counterintuitive shift of, is this really wise? Is this really the smart thing? So talk about that, because those little choices that you vulnerably write and walk us through in the book, I think are so meaningful and practical.
I'll get to that, but first I gotta tell you this because I've never told you this before, and it's a big deal. You told me at Pondo, you told me about watching your dad as he got more and more physically weak, and I'd also heard that from Natalie talking about her grandfather as he wasted away, just going from this huge man and just whittling down, and that played on my heart and my mind because I knew my daughter, Hero, she was going to see me weak. She was going to see me get sick. She was going to see me go through radiation and chemo. And there was no way that I'd be able to stop her from seeing that. And so as I sat there in the parking lot and that was on my mind and 2 Corinthians is on my mind, I realized I need to be okay with letting her see me sick. I need to learn how to be vulnerable with my daughter and the world, but it starts with my daughter.
Yeah.
I need to allow her to see me be vulnerable. And I had this sense of I can allow that if I also allow her to see me be resilient. And so that became very, very important to me because I didn't want to hide that from the people that I love the most. I didn't want to hide and pretend like I still had everything okay and together. But the fact was, no, I'm dealing with something that, people tell you when you're going through cancer, oh, you got this. You got this. You don't. You don't at all. And so I didn't want to pretend, but I did want to make sure that in some way, somehow, Hero would get to see what resilience looked like. And I wanted her to see that in a spiritual way, and I wanted her to see that in a tangible way. So after I'd prayed, God, what are you doing? And he was gracious enough to answer through scripture. Then I prayed and said, okay, how can I cooperate with this? How can I join you in this? And that's where I got that crazy idea, that you just mentioned, like, well, what if I do an Ironman while I'm going through radiation and chemotherapy? What if I did something that I never believed I could do at my best? What if I did it on my worst day? And what that allowed me to do as I thought about that, well, first I thought, this sounds crazy, as you mentioned, how do you discern that? But when I first had the idea, I thought, okay, this allows Hero to see me get back up. And if this actually works, she gets to see this physical resilience, but also, like you mentioned, she gets to see the spiritual resilience of, I'm not just going to give up. I'm not just going to give up, but I'm actually I'm going to take God at his word. And I'm going to believe this, not just kind of like at a distance, but okay, if really when I'm weak, then I'm strong, I'm going to do something. And I wanted something that she could see. I didn't just want words. I didn't want to tell her a story about like how I internally reacted. I wanted her to be able to see it. And so that's why I chose to do an Ironman, 140-mile triathlon. But when I had the thought, I also had the thought of, this is crazy. This is stupid. And so what I did is I sought wise counsel, right? First, Natalie, wisest woman I know. And also, this is going to affect her the most, right? Because she's got to stand by me as I'm going through cancer treatment. And then if I add on top of that, training for a triathlon, which this, but your listeners don't. I'm not an athlete. We'd go play basketball. You'd kind pass the ball to me. I'd miss it. It hit me in the face. You would laugh. You're awesome. I'm not an athlete. I wasn't a triathlete. I had never ran a marathon. I didn't even play high school sports. And so there was nothing there to build on. But I thought, okay, this is crazy. Let's see what Natalie said. And she said, I think that's a good idea. I think you should do it. Without even me having to convince her. Just asked her. She said, yeah, let's do it. Then I went to Joe Grana, a pastor outside of my church. And I asked him if this was stupid. He said, no, I think you should do it. I think it's good. And so that's when I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I committed to it. When things got tough, when, a pandemic hits, when things are tough on my family, I did have to go, did I miss it? Like, is this not what I should be doing? And that was really hard. But at that point, I had told Hero that I was dedicating my race to her. I had told her my intentions of, honey, I want to let you see me get back up. I want to show you that when we're weak, then we're strong. And that's what kept me going. Whether it was wise or not, I don't know. But that's the piece that kept me going.
I remember when you went to Houston for some treatment at the hospital. And Houston's got some amazing hospitals. And I think you're there. You kind of move into like a little apartment. I called you and, I'm thinking you're getting, chemo and radiation and going through the whole kind of just gamut. And I, just seeing other friends, parents have to walk through this. And you had just gotten off the treadmill and you were like running. And I'm like, wait, what? And again, cognitive dissonance here. One, you have all the permission in the world just to not do a thing. And also, you aren't an athlete. But you have a drive and a commitment to learn and a willingness to actually suffer for good. And I just remember like, wait, he's actually doing this. He's not just saying he's going to do this. He's actually doing this even the day he gets chemo, and then the next morning walking and start and run. And then actually like not hiring, but like getting like coaches for swimming and getting a bike and like starting to train and getting up early and all of a sudden it's like you just from afar, I just started watching and I'm like, he's going to do this. Like he's actually going to do this. But I have to imagine there were days where you're like, what am I get the point of what I am weak, I am strong. Do I really need to run 26.2? Do I really need to swim in the ocean or the water? Like, because you were planning for an Ironman, and then the pandemic hits, and we'll get to that in a moment. But like, were there moments throughout that you're like, I get the point. Like, I understand. I'm weak. I'm strong. Or were you like, nope, I have to push myself?
Yeah, I didn't start questioning things until the pandemic, and this is why. So on the first day, so after I had brain surgery, and I'd recovered just enough, is about 3 weeks after. Then they said, okay, you're recovered enough to start radiation and chemo. So on the first day of radiation and chemo, I ran a mile, and then like you said, I had relocated to Houston in August, and I had no idea how humid Houston is in August. I'd never been there. And so I ran outdoors and I said, nah, I'm getting a gym pass. Where's the 24-hour? And I'm going to do this on the treadmill. So anyway, I just, every day, I'd wake up and say, all right, God, give me strength. And then I would train every day. And I kept improving, going a little further and a little further. And I didn't question it because I don't know if it's just my personality or what, but I've always been driven by purpose and driven by calling. Once I became a Christian and I felt called to ministry, that's something that has motivated me every day of my life. And now I'm at this stage where I'm on medical leave. I'm not pastoring. I went from this place where, this vibrant new church where you've got all these problems, but they're the good problems.
Yeah.
And I get excitement, maybe too much adrenaline from that kind of stuff. But I needed a sense of calling. And this idea of showing my daughter resilience, that became my calling. That became, I was spiritually leading a congregation, and now exclusively I can lead my daughter. And so that's what pushed me every day, because she would see me leave for treatment, and then she would see me come back drenched in sweat. And she knew what was going on. Now, I also knew that it was going to be, years later until she could fully understand this, but those images she would hold on to. So because of the calling and the sense of purpose, I was all in. And that's what motivated me every morning when I would get up and know I'm about to train, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be way harder than it should be, but I'm in.
You write a lot about prayer in I'm Weak, I'm Strong. And talk about how your prayer life shifted and what you learned I'm weak, I'm strong when it really comes to the bold prayers, the authentic prayers. What was that like? Because you have that moment in the parking lot of like, why now, God? Like, what are you doing to this purpose? But that can a continue consistent move of connection with God. Talk about that in this last season.
Yeah. So, those first two prayers, just want to be explicit because I think it's so important. It's prayers that I learned in college, that we learned in college from the Experiencing God devotional, Henry Blackaby.
Yeah.
Where he says, you gotta ask God, where are you working and how can I join you? And essentially I was just practicing that same prayer that I prayed so often in ministry. All right, God, where are you working? What are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then how can I, if this is what you're doing, how can I join you? So that's a prayer that you can pray when you're in crisis, but it's also a prayer you can pray every day. You can pray it in ministry. You can pray it for spiritual growth. And I think because I had already practiced that prayer for so long, it's where my heart immediately went without even thinking about it. And then now, as I've made this commitment, every morning I'm getting up and I'm feeling, fatigue and headache and nauseous. And so before I would put my feet on the ground, I'd have to pray the very simple prayer of, God, give me your strength. Give me strength. And it was this prayer that it became, I don't want to say ritual, because isn't that a bad word to use in the Christian faith? But it became a ritual of every morning saying, God, give me strength. And then I'd put my feet on the ground, I'd get up, and I'd trust him to give me strength throughout the day. And every day he did. And then, so I guess one of the things I'm working out, even as you ask this question, is my prayer life became very simple. There are these short, desperate prayers. I can't do this today if you don't give me strength. God, give me strength. And then as things became tough, like, I don't know how to swim. I can keep my head above water, but there's no way I'm going to be able to go, 1.5 miles in the open ocean. And so then the really simple prayer of God, help. One of the things I learned is that when I pray God, help, most often God would send somebody. And I thought back to a sermon that you preached at dorm devos in college. So you're a good preacher if this dude over here remembers something. You just got back from a trip. I forget where, maybe South America or something like that. But I remember you making sense of what you saw and the desolation that people had. And you gave a message on the fact that if you're gonna say, God, where are you? You need to really say, God, where are your people? And if God's people aren't willing to go, then people aren't going to see God working. And I found that to be very true in this time of my life. I pray, God, help. And I really needed God, help. And then all of a sudden, like one individual would come to me just out of the blue and say, hey, I can help. And so here's this guy, he's a D1 college swimmer. And he's like, yeah, I can help you learn how to swim. Oh, cool. Like, don't you work? And he's like, yeah, I'll leave work early to see you at the pool every day. And he was faithful to his commitment. Same thing with cycling, same thing when I was in Houston and I was running and I was feeling tired, like, oh, how am I going to get out of here? How am I going to get up? And then all of a sudden, this guy that I did ministry with, a decade before, he DM'd me, hey, I'm in Houston. We should get together. He just happened to be like a quarterback coach for high school students. And so he had free time in the morning. He'd drive an hour every day to meet me in the gym just to make sure I was there, just to make sure I got up. And then he'd yell at me, encouraging things. But but all throughout, and even right in the middle of the triathlon where I thought I'm not going to make it, I prayed, God help. And there's my coach that shows up out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the learnings. In simple prayers are enough. And when I pray, God help, he most typically sends me a person.
So good. You had this grandiose dream of going to Hawaii, doing the Ironman, and then the pandemic hits and they don't do it and I think some of the tricky parts is like, whenever you're going through this, I think it's easy to have like expectations, how this is going to go, how this report's going to go, how this medical report's going to go, how this situation that you dreamed up is going to go. And then all of a sudden it's like, Ironman, like the race hears about your story and almost gives like special permission to do it in a different way. Talk about that expectation gap, and then also the shift to how the Ironman actually took place.
So when you think about resilience, which the book's all about resilience, when you think about resilience, there's kind of two sides of the coin. One part is just that grit that won't quit. We hear a lot about that. And sure, that's part of it. But the other side is flexibility. And that's the more common definition of resilience, the ability to be malleable, to be flexible. And I would say even more than the fact that I'm not an athlete, even more, I'm not flexible. So I'm stubborn. I get a vision in my head and it's got to be exactly that. And I can get so discouraged if it's not that. I can get frustrated. I can get angry. All sorts of not good stuff flows out of me when things aren't going exactly as I have seen it in my head. And so, when Ironman closed down the first race that I was scheduled in, I was disappointed. But fortunately, Natalie helps me readjust those expectations. Deferred to another race that got canceled. And again, Natalie helped. Finally, Ironman canceled all races worldwide. Just said, we can't do it. We can't do it. But to their credit, they're resilient too, in the fact that they go, okay, this gives us the opportunity to do something that we've talked about for years, but we've never pulled the trigger on. They were wanting to get into the field of virtual racing, which is like, Peloton was becoming big. And so that virtual side of things was more possible. But what they wanted to do is to open it up to more athletes to say, okay, you may not be able to get to Hawaii, but you can still, somehow you can do it virtually. So they've been thinking about that for a long time. And they said, okay, I guess the time is now. Let's do this. We're going to do our first ever full distance virtual race. And like you mentioned, my story had gotten to them. I kind of embodied their whole slogan of anything's possible. And so at that point, I was an Ironman athlete. Obviously not because of my speed or any of those things. It wasn't those things. It was simply my story. And so we had been communicating, and they're the ones that called me and told me we're shutting everything down. And they pitched this idea of a virtual race. And I asked them a few more questions, and I thought, that's impossible. There's no way. There's no way. I didn't say that to them, but in my heart, in my gut, I'm like, it's impossible, because I had never been to an Ironman, never been in, like there's all this like lingo, all this jargon that I didn't even know what it was, like aid stations. I didn't know what an aid station was. Transition zone, I kind of knew what that was. Aid stations. And I thought, so you're telling me I've got to plan all these things? I don't just have to make it through the 160. I gotta 140.6. I've got to actually plan this race, and not just how hard is it to plan 140 miles of track, and then also provide volunteers to work all the aid stations, to set up transition zones that are 26 miles away. How on earth can I do that? And so, I told Ironman, like it's one dude, hey, Ironman. I told the representative that I was talking to, I said, let me talk to my wife, which is a great way of saying no, and blaming it on your spouse. But true to my word, I talked to Natalie, and she, being much more flexible than me, said, Jay, I think it's a really good idea. I think you should do it. And, when you originally thought about traveling, it was a romantic idea, family vacation, we'll make the most of it. But she said, you would have no support system there because they're not traveling there.
Right.
And so here, this is your church congregation. This is where your family and friends live. And so now you get that support, which through this whole process, like I said, when you pray for help, God sends his people. One of the things I learned is just how important community really is. And so when she said you should do it and made the point about community, I thought, okay, yeah, I can do this. And so I called back and said, yeah, I'm in. Now, fortunately, I have good friends and good community. And a person that you and I both respect so highly, Brittany Breckwald.
Oh, legend.
Yes, she came on in such a huge way. I was fortunate that there was a documentary being made, and I had a crew that was following me. And so the producer was able to hire another producer to produce the race.
Wow.
So they hired Brittany Breckwald. And so she worked through all the logistics, and there was a ton of logistics. She had over 100 volunteers. She was working with the cities that I'd be traveling through. She was working with venues. She was working with everybody. And so I'm not going to say it was easy on my part, but it would have been impossible without Brittany. And I didn't have that in my vision, but it became better. As things got harder, they also became more significant. And I was able to be loved by more people and show love to more people. So it was pretty incredible that way.
That's amazing. So in Newport Beach, in Back Bay, you start the swim, then you transition to the bike, and then you have it set up where you run this marathon, but you actually end on your street. And just kind of talk about the morning till the evening of that experience, from really dusk till dark. You were in water on a bike or feet on the street. Just talk about that day.
Yeah. 4:30, the alarm goes off. Pray the same thing that I prayed every day. God, give me strength. My feet on the ground, got up, and go downstairs, check to make sure everything is packed and set and the way it should be. And then I took off for Newport Beach. And when I got there, this is one of the beautiful things. I was excited about Ironman's opening ceremony and their closing party, because they're legendary, right? Like, people talk about it like it's part of the experience. And so Brittany had created an opening ceremony. So she took a wedding venue that is used in this beautiful back bay of Newport Beach. She rented out the wedding venue, and then about 100 friends showed up for that, right at pre-dawn, and it was really cool. One of my friends actually flew out to be a part of it. His name was Steve Carter, and it meant so much to me, man. It really did. And here's the reason why it meant so much to me that you were there. A lot of people will say whatever you need. And some people out of state will even go as far as saying, dude, I'm just a plane ride away. Just let me know I'm just a plane ride away. But you actually got on a plane. Not everybody that says that they're just a plane ride away will actually get on a plane, but you did. You got on a plane, and to have you lead that opening ceremony, to have you pray over me and lead us in prayer, it was really, really special for me. So again, sometimes when things don't go your way, they get better.
Yeah.
I wished I could have been a part of the Ironman opening ceremony, but this, to be with my friends, my family, my congregation to start it was, I was in tears before we even started.
Yeah.
So I'm in tears. And, I step up to the start line and everybody counts down 3, 2, 1. Natalie and Hero hit the bullhorn, and I hit start on my watch, and that's the way that that Ironman tracks you. It's through an app and your watch, your sports watch, your GPS. And so I hit start on the watch, and I charge down to the water, and I jump in, and it's cold. It's cold, wakes you right up. And as I'm swimming, a bunch of people from the opening ceremony went to this footbridge, and they were just lining the footbridge. And every time I would take a breath from the swim, I'd tilt my head up to the side, and I could see them. And it brought me so much joy to have that support. But even more, halfway down the footbridge, as I take a stroke, I see Hero, and we lock eyes, or at least I have one eye out of the water. But we see each other, and we just know. And she could tell as well. And she started jumping up and down and waving. And I was at this perfect point in my stroke where my hand came out of the water, and I was able to wave back. And my heart was just swelled up with so much love. And I started kicking faster, going faster. And as I left that footbridge and going out, I just thought, what a picture of the kingdom of God, where here's this guy who's been dealt a blow, terminal brain cancer. And somehow, some way, instead of a pity party, there's this party of people cheering him on to do what's only possible with God. And as I'm swimming, I'm just reflecting, going through the Lord's Prayer in the water, and just thinking, like, only in the kingdom of God does something like this occur. And so by the end of the 2.5 mile swim, I get out of the water, and instead of feeling tired, I'm feeling good. I feel like, that's like a good warm up. Let's go. And so get out of my wetsuit. And this is something I learned, that there are things called strippers at triathlons. And they're the people that tear the wetsuit off of you so you can get on the bike. So I had some strippers get the wetsuit off of me and jump on the bike, and I head out. And at this point, the sun is just really starting to come up. And so as I'm heading up PCH, there's this nice little sunrise coming up. And man, people fly from all over the world to ride PCH. It's like just one of the greatest cycling routes there are. And so I'm heading up, and it's just beautiful. It's a crisp morning. The sun's awesome. I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean. And as I'm heading up the route, all of a sudden, this motorcycle cop pulls up next to me. And at that point, I thought, uh-oh, were we supposed to get a permit? and he looks at me, and it's a sight to see, right? Because you got to know, like, Ironman is following me. Like, they're broadcasting this live. And so they got a motorcycle next to me with, a guy hanging off the back with a camera. And then next to them, there's the documentary crew that's doing the same thing. And behind me, there's a Sprinter van with a paramedic and a bike tech. And so, like, we're going down a major highway. And when the cop pulled up, I thought, oh man, this could be it. But then he passed me, and he shut down the intersection in front of me so that we could just blow through the intersections. And he kept shutting down intersections. And when we got out of Newport Beach, all of a sudden Huntington Beach showed up and passed me off. And then from Huntington Beach to Long Beach. And so, like, it was just incredible to have the community rallying behind you. And it was fun, like, cause again, I'm not an athlete. I'm not in Tour de France. Like, there's not supposed to be a police escort shutting down intersections, but it happened. And so, that went on for 112 miles. And then after 112 miles, I'm still feeling pretty good. Of course you're tired at that point, but I was still feeling pretty good. And I got off my bike at the transition zone in Yorba Linda, where, that's where the church is. And so there's a lot of people there. And I get off the bike, and I'm feeling really good. And then Hero's there, and she comes up to give me a hug, and she knocks me flat on my back. And I go, maybe I'm not as strong as I thought. So now I've got a marathon in front of me, which is kind of the scary part. Yeah, it's scary. The swim's scary because most people that are just starting off in triathlon, they don't know how to swim. So when you think like over 2 miles in open ocean, like that's rough. But also it's just as scary to think, okay, I've never ran a marathon before. At that point, well, before I committed, I'd never run more than 10 miles before. And so to do a full marathon after doing 115 miles, like that's scary. But I was feeling pretty good. And I started off and I had a guy running beside me that's pacing me. And after a mile, I asked him like, hey, what's my pace? And he said, you're running 8-minute miles, which my plan was to run 10-minute miles. And so I was going a lot faster than I should have been going. And so, I thought, okay, this is a marathon, not a sprint, slow down. And so the next mile, I slowed down and I asked him, all right, Jimmy, where am I at now? He said 8.5-minute miles. And I thought, maybe this, whole when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Maybe this is like superhuman. I'm just going to blow through this. I was already ahead of my pace anyway for the whole thing. So I'm doing really well. I'm feeling really well. And I'm toying with the idea of like, maybe I'm just going to have a faster pace than I thought. And then about a half mile after that, it just hit me, hit me hard. Where the whole time I was worried because of the chemotherapy. I was worried that I would cramp. That's one of the side effects of chemotherapy. And so the only way to counter that is through nutrition, making sure you're really on top of your nutrition through the race. And so I was really on top of nutrition, maybe a little too much. I don't know. But one of the things that I didn't know at the time, but I've come to learn is one of the things chemotherapy can do is just destroy your digestive system, which it had done. So I was putting all of this nutrition into my stomach, but it wasn't being absorbed. It wasn't being digested. So it's just sitting in my stomach, which is fine when you're swimming and when you're cycling, it's all stationary. But once you start running, everything gets jostled in there. And then it decided no more of this.
Wow.
And all the nutrition sitting there was no longer sitting there. And I realized, okay, if I've got, a little more than 20 miles to go, if I can't take a sip of water and I have issues with cramping already, there's no way my body's going to be able to go that far. And so I just had to come to terms with that and realize like, I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to make it to the finish line. And as you mentioned, we had strategized, again, my wife's idea, brilliant. We had strategized to have the finish line right in front of my house. And so it became this metaphor that I'm fighting every day to make it home to my family. And now in this race, I'm fighting to make it home. And I had this realization, I'm not going to make it. My body's not going to make it. No matter how much willpower I have, it doesn't matter. If I cramp up 20 miles out, 10 miles out, 5 miles, no matter what, I'm not going to be able to crawl that far. And I just had to come to terms with like, okay, if it's not going to happen, then what matters? And I decided, well, what matters is that I give everything to make it home. I wanted to be able to look Hero in the eye and say, honey, even though I didn't make it to the finish line, I gave it my all to make it home to you. And that became very important. And so I developed this mantra of, you've got nothing to prove, just an example to set. And I just said that to myself over and over again. Got nothing to prove, just an example to set. And there's a lot to prove. I had a documentary crew with me. I had, again, another 100 people waiting for me at the finish line. And people knew that I was doing this. It's being broadcast through Ironman's channels. And I had to let go of that and say, even if everybody thinks I'm a failure, I need to show my daughter that I gave my all for her. And that's what matters.
Isn't it amazing? Like we think that I'm strong, but usually when we think about the strength, it's really underneath that is I'm just trying to prove that I'm strong. And when you were telling me about that mantra, years ago, like the one foot in front of the other, an example to set. Like, I'm so weak, but I do have control over this. I have this person, this example for in Christ, but also for my daughter Hero, that to let her see and to drown out that noise. And somehow like it makes you strong. And somehow it like there is this flexible, resilient piece that kind of rose up. And you finish, and just one of my favorite pictures is just you just embracing Hero and on your street and lights, and it goes viral and there's all this amazing stuff. And documentary gets released just recently, just on Amazon, that details the journey, and it's just amazing. It's like so amazing. And I think that like there's something about this that I feel like has had to shape you as a person. And I think the book details that. As a father, the book details that. How is this like in the church space? Because you'll go and you'll speak, but how has this shaped your preaching? Even just that mantra, I got nothing to prove, just an example to set. It's a beautiful kingdom discipleship mantra. Yeah, I got nothing to prove as a preacher, just an example to set. Like, but how is walking through and the embodiment of this phrase, I'm weak, I'm strong, how does that change like the way you teach people, see people, speak to people?
It's taken me out of the seat of expert. Like we know we're not the expert, and that's not even what we should be pretending that we are.
Yeah.
But it has helped it to become more natural to me. Mm. I'm not the expert.
Yeah.
I don't have it all together.
Yeah.
I'm in a place in life where like by my strength, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And so it takes me out of the expert seat and gives me grace. Like I feel like I'm so much more gracious now, so much more kind to myself and kind to the people that I'm speaking to. And I'm not looking to preach fire, but just looking to encourage. And I think I've realized how much people need hope. Mm-hmm. They need hope. And so if I can bring hope, that is such a gift. And I've found that now that I'm speaking in churches, but I'm also speaking in like more corporate environments, I had to wrestle with like, okay, like it's not appropriate to come in, take the mic and just preach the gospel until they kick me off stage. Like that's not going to help anybody. And so as I wrestled with the Lord of like, how do I honor you in these spaces? I just realized if I can bring hope, that's more than enough. That makes the Lord proud. That makes my time worth it. And that really blesses people. And so now preaching hope is my number one. Preaching hope is my number one. And, as you think about that mantra during the race of I've got nothing to prove, just an example to set, I think I could sum it up now of I've got nothing to prove. I have a story to steward. It's not the story I want, but God's given me a story and I'm still in the middle of it, but I'm going to steward it. I'm going to use it for his glory. I'm going to use it to encourage people, bring other people hope that, yeah, you're weak. I'm weak. We're all weak. We're all human. We're all frail. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay because that's where we find our strength. And I think in preaching and outside of preaching, I've learned that probably the most powerful weakness is vulnerability. Making yourself vulnerable. And it's not just saying the things that you don't want to say. It's when you're being vulnerable, you're putting yourself in a place where pain can happen. Yeah. You're putting yourself in a place where maybe people can judge you. You're putting yourself in a place where maybe people can take advantage of you. Maybe they can use the information that you're telling them for their advantage and not yours. And I realized that, yes, especially from stage, you don't want to be inappropriate with your vulnerability. There's a certain level of discernment, but like the last video that I posted on Instagram talking about how the tumor has now recurred and I'm moving back to this position of weakness. I didn't want to post it. I was like, I don't know. But when I did post it, I posted it for myself. Because I'd written this book, it really helped me to solidify how good it is to be vulnerable and how good it is to allow others to carry your burdens. And so I thought, I need to let people know. But what I did not expect by posting that video is how many responses I would get from people saying, I needed to hear this. This is what I needed today. This is the hope that it brought to me. And that's not what I was expecting at all. But as I've gone through this, as I've been given this story, as I'm still in this story, and I continue to allow myself to be vulnerable, I'm just finding like it's helping.
Yeah.
It's helping.
This whole interview, I feel like I can feel the emotion just so close. When you texted me and said, hey, let's come back and pray for me because I'm going to go talk to Hero, and I just went to my bedroom. I had my own like, why now, God? A few months after the book comes out, and I just, I wept, it's just like, it's one of the best people, we were stood in each other's weddings and just, cheered and championed each other in ministry, and then this like weird sense of you sometimes write a book to the person you once were, and that's like where the audience is like you're writing because you've moved through it. And now you're looking back and it's like people who are just about to experience this. Now they have this like guide, this gift. And yet in some ways this book was writing to those who you once were, but it's also writing to who you are being invited to become again. And I found myself just going, gosh, if anybody can do it, God can through you, and also at the same time, like watching I'm weak, I'm strong, and now this like resounding hope, from that like Instagram video and like talking to you and like, how do you feel like in the sense of like, all right, it's like, this is like the sequel in some ways to the book. What's that do inside you? And I think there's probably, pastors who are going through a similar situation, different context, obviously, but it's like, I tried again at a church and my board screwed me over, or I tried again in a relationship and the person didn't want to reconcile. I tried, like, I'm. How do you face again, and have that flexibility as an ability and hold that hope that's a reality? Like, what would you say to them right now?
Question, what would you say to them? And what would you say to yourself?
Yeah.
What have I been telling myself? You know what I've been telling myself? Same God. And it might look different. I don't know how it's going to play out, but he was so present. And I know he's still there.
Yeah.
And I get in these pockets of emotion, like when we got the news, so surprised, so disappointed, so sad. I cried so much more this time than any time leading up to this. And I think one of the reasons why I cried more is because I've been through it and I've learned to be more vulnerable and allow myself to cry and grieve. And then also because I know what I'm getting into. I know what surgeries are like. I know what chemo's like. I know what it is to be tired and sick and wanting to be there for your family, but not being able to. So there's a certain sadness when it happens again. So I think one of the things I would say to those that are facing it again is it's okay to feel deep sadness. That's right. And if you deny it, if you just try and push by it, you'll miss the weakness that's necessary for strength. You'll just stay weak. But if you're courageous enough to go like, it's terrible, and feel the sadness, it's the same God that will carry you through. His power will be demonstrated through that weakness. So here we go. Yeah, here we go. And so I was starting to say, like these pockets of emotion, yes, sometimes disappointment and sadness and surprise, but also just as much, I'm getting these pockets that are releasing these warm tears of love. Because I've always had a hard time accepting help and letting people love me. And I remember the director of the film, like he saw that in me and he was like, Jay, people love you so much. I'm like, yeah. But I've learned to accept that help and that love more than I had before. And so now I see people rising to love me and I'm remembering back to how people loved me before. And there's this warmth in the sadness. And it's bringing me courage. It's bringing me courage, knowing, yes, same God, and God's people are here too. And I don't want, when I say God's people, kind of distance it, but like the people who love me really love me. Yeah. And they're here too. So God's here and the people that I love me and they're here too. Like, okay, I can do this. I don't want to do it. I don't want this. Yeah, don't want this. But it's my reality. Yeah. I can do that. I can face reality. And who knows what's going to happen? That's the thing. I've also learned, like, who knows? And so I'm just kind of waiting to see, like, okay, what's it look like this time for God's power to be working through me? And I know what I want. Kind of in the same way that in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, I'm like, I want my daughter to see me get back up. I can let her see me weak, but as long as she can see me get back up. This came from writing. Late in the book, I have this kind of like scary moment of writing and saying, now it's time to channel all of this into my family, overcoming my past that has really impacted my relationships with those closest to me. And so now I know that I want to take all the strength that I put into Ironman, the last round, not do something stupid like that again, but instead using all of that intention to love my family, to be present with my family. I'm in this therapy session with Natalie, and we tell our therapist that it's recurred, and she just starts crying. We're all crying in therapy together. The therapist is crying. I've never had that happen before, but later in the session, I broke down because I just said, I'm so scared that I won't be able to be present with my family, that I'm going to be a little snappy, a little cranky, and that during this time, I'm going to push away from my family where I so deeply want to grow closer with them. And so I don't know what that looks like. Yeah. I don't know how to engage in that, but I know that this time around, that's what I want. Yeah. Not on a metaphorical level, but like in the day-to-day, shoulder to shoulder. That's what I want.
Yeah. You are not an athlete, but you are an Ironman. You you're a person of purpose, and you had a purpose to, and the challenge and the grueling nature of the training and the swimming and the biking and the running. And it's really amazing though, the way that you just described that is, in this next season, just to be so present. And I think for, many listeners, and definitely you and me, high achievers, like purpose, focus, drive, sometimes that presence piece can be even more challenging than actually accomplishing an Ironman, but I think you have what it takes, and you are so good, and you do have people who love you. I'm gonna end with this question, and you don't have to answer it. You don't have to, we can edit it out if you want to. What do you want your daughter to say about Jay Hewitt?
I want her to say, my dad loved my mom really well. And my dad loved me really well. And I always knew that I was more important than the other stuff.
I love every time we talk, you always tell me a story about Hero. And you're doing that stuff, bro. And you will continue to do it. And friends, I'm telling you, get I Am Weak, I'm Strong. It's an amazing book. And if you are an Amazon Prime person like myself, the documentary is called Dear Hero. And Hero is the name of Jay's daughter. The name Hero is based off Shakespeare. And it's really, really beautiful. It details the story. And Jay is just such an absolute gift. Hey, thanks for the vulnerability. Thanks for, trusting me and going there with me. Dude, I love you and for you. And friends, go to jayhewitt.org, follow him online. And I think when you see the way he talks about hope and resiliency, when you read the words that he writes, these aren't just ideas. They are embodied truths because of how deep this man goes with Jesus. So have the utmost respect for this guy. Someday, maybe I'll tell you how he and I snuck into a U2 concert and had some of the greatest experiences. But that's for another day. Much love, everyone. Grace and peace. And we will see you again in a couple weeks.